What happens when a legendary icon sits down for what should be a routine interview, only to face the most hostile interrogation of her career? In just 45 seconds, one shocking comment would expose the true character of a daytime television host and turn a simple conversation into an explosive confrontation that no one saw coming. The studio lights blazed down on the familiar set of The View as Cher settled into the guest chair, her silver hair catching the brightness as she adjusted her black blazer. She had done countless interviews over her decades in entertainment, but something felt different about this morning. The energy was tense, charged with an undercurrent she could not quite place. Joy Behar sat across from her, fingers drumming impatiently on her note cards as the cameras rolled. The introduction had been brief, almost dismissive, and now Joy leaned forward with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "So, Cher," Joy began, her voice carrying an edge that the studio audience seemed to pick up on immediately. "You have been in this business for what, 50 years now? That is a long time to stay relevant, is it not?" The question landed like a subtle slap. Cher blinked, taken aback by the passive-aggressive tone. "Well, I have been fortunate to connect with audiences across generations," she replied diplomatically, her voice steady despite the unexpected hostility. "Fortunate?" Joy repeated, letting the word hang in the air. "Or maybe you have just been very good at reinventing yourself whenever your career starts to fade. Some might call that calculating." The studio fell silent. Even the crew members exchanged glances. This was not how interviews typically began on The View. Cher maintained her composure, but her jaw tightened slightly. "I think artists evolve naturally," Cher responded, her tone still professional, but with a hint of steel creeping in. "Growth and change are part of any creative journey." Joy laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "Creative journey, that is one way to put it. Tell me, when you look back at some of your earlier work, do you ever feel embarrassed? I mean, some of those outfits alone." The audience stirred uncomfortably. A few people could be heard murmuring. This was supposed to be a promotional interview for Cher's upcoming project, but Joy seemed determined to make it something else entirely. Cher shifted in her chair, her famous poise beginning to crack. "I have always dressed to express myself. Fashion has been part of my artistic identity since the beginning." "Artistic identity," Joy scoffed, making air quotes with her fingers. "Is that what we are calling it? Because some of us remember when you were just Sunny's sidekick, singing backup and wearing whatever Bob Mackie creation would get the most attention." The words cut deep. Cher had spent decades proving herself as an independent artist, fighting against exactly this kind of dismissive attitude. Her eyes flashed with anger, but she kept her voice controlled. "I think you are misremembering history, Joy. I was never anyone's sidekick. Sunny and I were partners, creatively and personally, until we were not." Joy leaned back, clearly enjoying the discomfort she was causing. "Partners. Right. And when that partnership ended, you just happened to find your way to Greg Allman, then to other relationships that kept you in the headlines. Convenient timing." The studio audience was now openly uncomfortable. Several people shook their heads, and one woman could be heard saying, "This is not right," under her breath. But Joy pressed on, seemingly oblivious to or uncaring about the reaction she was generating. Cher's composure finally began to show cracks. "I find it interesting that you are focusing on my personal relationships rather than my work. Is this how you interview all your guests? Or am I receiving special treatment?" "Special treatment," Joy repeated mockingly. "Oh, Cher, you have been receiving special treatment your entire career. The question is whether you deserved it." The comment hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Even the other hosts looked shocked. This had crossed every line of professional courtesy and basic human decency. Cher stared at Joy for a long moment, her famous composure finally cracking completely. "Excuse me? Did you just suggest that my 5 decades of success were somehow unearned?" Joy shrugged, a cruel smile playing at her lips. "I am just saying that talent alone does not explain everything. Sometimes it helps to know the right people, date the right people, wear the right outfits to the right parties." The implication was crystal clear, and it was devastating. Joy was essentially calling Cher's entire career into question, suggesting that her success was built on something other than merit. The audience was now openly hostile toward Joy, with several people standing and others calling out in Cher's defense. Cher stood up slowly, her whole body trembling with barely contained rage. "I have sat here and listened to you insult my work, my relationships, and my integrity. I came here as a guest, expecting professional courtesy, and instead I am being treated like some kind of fraud." "Sit down, Cher," Joy said dismissively. "We are not finished here." The command was the final straw. Cher's eyes blazed with fury as she looked down at Joy, who remained seated with that same cruel smile. Actually, Joy, we are finished. I have been in this business since before you knew what a television camera was, and I have never been spoken to with such disrespect by a professional colleague. Joy laughed again, that same cold sound. Professional colleague? Cher, let's be honest about what you are. You are a celebrity, not a journalist. You sing songs and wear costumes. I asked the hard questions. The comment revealed everything about Joy's mindset. She saw herself as somehow superior, more legitimate, more worthy of respect than her guest. It was a breathtaking display of arrogance and professional misconduct. Cher's hands were shaking now, not from fear, but from pure outrage. The woman who had conquered every entertainment medium, who had won an Oscar, a Grammy, and an Emmy, was being treated like some tabloid curiosity by a daytime television host who seemed drunk on her own perceived power. Hard questions? Cher's voice rose, cutting through the stunned silence of the studio. Joy, you have not asked me a single question about my work, my craft, or anything substantive. You have spent this entire time trying to tear me down for your own entertainment. Joy finally seemed to realize that things were spiraling beyond her control, but instead of backing down, she doubled down with even more venom. Oh, please, Cher. Do not act like you are some misunderstood artist. You built your career on spectacle and controversy. You married your way through Hollywood and sang your way into relevance whenever the spotlight started to dim. The studio audience erupted. People were shouting, some standing and pointing at Joy, others trying to show support for Cher. The camera operators looked to their producers, unsure whether to keep rolling or cut away from this disaster unfolding in real time. Cher took a step closer to Joy's desk, her voice now carrying decades of suppressed frustration with exactly this kind of treatment. You want to talk about building careers on spectacle? Let's talk about what you are doing right now. You invited me here under the pretense of a normal interview, and instead you are trying to humiliate me on live television. For what? Ratings? Your own ego? I'm doing my job. Joy shot back, her own voice rising to match Cher's intensity. My job is to ask the questions that other people are afraid to ask, to cut through the public relations nonsense and get to the truth. The truth? Cher laughed bitterly. Joy, you would not recognize the truth if it sat down and had coffee with you. You are not interested in truth. You are interested in drama, in conflict, in making yourself feel important by trying to make your guests feel small. Joy's face was flushing red now, her carefully constructed television persona cracking under the pressure of Cher's counterattack. How dare you lecture me about truth? You who has reinvented yourself more times than Madonna? Who has had more comebacks than a boomerang? The comparison to Madonna was clearly intended as another insult, but it backfired spectacularly. Cher seized on it immediately. You just compared me to Madonna, another woman who has had an incredible career spanning decades. Thank you for making my point. Successful women like Madonna and me, we get criticized for evolving, for growing, for refusing to be put in a box by people like you who think we should disappear after our first hit. Joy realized her mistake but was too far down this destructive path to turn back now. That is not what I meant, and you know it. I meant that both of you have used controversy and publicity stunts to stay relevant when your actual talent was not enough. The words were like gasoline on a fire. Cher's composure finally shattered completely, and her response came with the full force of a woman who had endured decades of this exact kind of dismissive treatment. Not enough talent? Cher's voice cracked with emotion. Joy, I have sold over 100 million records worldwide. I have won every major entertainment award that exists. I have acted in films, starred on Broadway, and yes, I have survived and thrived in this business for 50 years. What exactly have you accomplished that gives you the right to sit there and judge my talent? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Joy had no answer because there was no answer. Her achievements, while respectable in television journalism, paled in comparison to Cher's legendary career. But instead of acknowledging this, Joy chose to get even nastier. I have built a career on intelligence and hard work, not on how low-cut my dresses were or which rock star I was sleeping with this week. The studio audience gasped collectively. Several people could be heard shouting, "That's enough!" and "This is disgusting!" But Joy seemed to be in some kind of fugue state, unable to stop herself from saying increasingly horrible things. Cher stood frozen for a moment, processing the sheer cruelty of what had just been said. When she spoke again, her voice was quiet but carried more power than when she had been shouting. Joy, I came here today as a professional courtesy. I have done thousands of interviews, and I have never, not once, been spoken to the way you are speaking to me right now. You have insulted my work, my intelligence, my relationships, and my character. You have made assumptions about my personal life that are not only wrong but deeply hurtful." Joy seemed to realize she had gone too far, but her pride would not let her back down. "I am just being honest about what everyone is thinking." "No," Cher said firmly. "You are being cruel. There is a difference between honest journalism and personal attack, and you crossed that line before this interview even began. You did not invite me here to talk about my work or my projects. You invited me here to tear me down, and I will not sit here and let you do it." The other hosts on the panel had been sitting in stunned silence throughout this exchange, clearly uncomfortable but apparently unable or unwilling to intervene. Now, as Cher began to remove her microphone, one of them finally spoke up. "Maybe we should take a commercial break," she suggested weakly. Joy turned on her colleague with the same venom she had been directing at Cher. "We are in the middle of an interview. Our guest seems to be having trouble handling straightforward questions." That final dismissive comment was the last straw. Cher had been slowly backing away from her chair, but now she stopped and turned back to face Joy directly. "Straightforward questions?" Cher's voice was steady now, filled with the dignity that Joy had been trying to strip away from her all morning. "Joy, let me ask you a straightforward question. When you go home tonight and watch this back, are you going to be proud of how you conducted yourself today? Are you going to feel good about the way you treated another human being?" Joy's face twisted into something ugly as she realized she was losing control of the narrative entirely. The woman who prided herself on being the sharp-tongued questioner was now being questioned herself, and she clearly did not like it. "Do not turn this around on me, Cher. I am not the one who cannot handle a little scrutiny. I am not the one who is falling apart because someone asked me about my past." "A little scrutiny?" Cher's voice carried the weight of every insult, every dismissive comment, every attempt to diminish her accomplishments. "Joy, you have spent this entire interview trying to convince your audience that I am some kind of talentless opportunist who slept her way to success. That is not scrutiny. That is character assassination." The studio audience was now completely on Cher's side, with people openly booing Joy and shouting support for the legendary entertainer. But Joy seemed oblivious to the crowd's reaction, locked in her own bubble of righteous indignation. "I call it like I see it," Joy declared. "And what I see is someone who has gotten by on looks and connections rather than genuine talent." The comment was so outrageous, so completely divorced from reality, that even some of the crew members could be heard laughing in disbelief. Cher stared at Joy as if seeing her clearly for the first time. "Joy, I want you to listen to yourself. Really listen. You are sitting there telling me, to my face, that my 50-year career is based on looks and connections. You are saying this about someone who has been inducted into multiple halls of fame, who has won Academy Awards, who has sold more records than most artists ever dream of." Joy crossed her arms defensively. "Awards can be bought. Records can be manipulated. The industry takes care of its favorites." The conspiracy theory mindset was now fully on display. Joy was so committed to her narrative of Cher as an undeserving pretender that she was willing to dismiss entire institutions and millions of fans who had supported Cher's work over the decades. Cher shook her head slowly, a sad smile crossing her face. "You know what the saddest part of this is, Joy? You are a woman in a tough industry, just like I am. We should be supporting each other, lifting each other up. Instead, you have chosen to use your platform to try to tear down another woman's life's work. Do not make this about gender," Joy snapped. "This is about accountability. This is about calling out celebrities who think they are above criticism." "Above criticism?" Cher laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Joy, I've been criticized my entire career. I've been called too old, too young, too weird, too mainstream, too controversial, not controversial enough. I have heard every possible criticism of my work, my appearance, my choices, but there is a difference between criticism and what you are doing here." Joy leaned forward aggressively. "And what exactly am I doing here?" "You are trying to erase me," Cher said simply. "You are trying to convince people that my entire life's work is meaningless, that my achievements are fraudulent, that I do not deserve the success I have earned. And you are doing it not because you have evidence or legitimate concerns, but because it makes you feel powerful." The accusation hit its mark. Joy's face flushed an even deeper red, and her voice cracked slightly when she responded. "That is ridiculous. I am a journalist. I ask tough questions. If you cannot handle that, maybe you should not be doing interviews." Cher pulled off her microphone completely now, holding it in her hand as she prepared to leave. "Joy, I have done interviews with real journalists. Barbara Walters, Katie Couric, Anderson Cooper. They asked tough questions too, but they asked them with respect, with professionalism, with the goal of informing their audience rather than humiliating their guests. The comparison to actual respected journalists seemed to sting Joy more than anything else that had been said. Her voice rose to near shouting levels. "Are you comparing me to Barbara Walters? I have been doing this job for years. I have interviewed presidents and world leaders. And yet, you chose to use your skills to ambush a guest who came here in good faith," Cher replied calmly. "That says everything anyone needs to know about your character." Joy stood up now too, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "My character? You want to talk about character? What about the character of someone who abandoned their child to chase fame?" The studio fell completely silent. Joy had just crossed the ultimate line, bringing Cher's family into her vicious attack. Several audience members could be heard gasping, and one woman started crying. Cher went very still, her face pale with shock and rage. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried more power than all of her previous words combined. "How dare you? How dare you bring my son into this? You know nothing about my family, nothing about the choices I made or the sacrifices I made to provide for him." Joy seemed to realize she had finally gone too far, but it was too late to take the words back. "I am just pointing out that people in glass houses should not throw stones." "Glass houses?" Cher's voice was stronger now, filled with maternal fury. "Joy, I raised my son while building a career in one of the most difficult industries in the world. I was there for every school play, every birthday, every important moment, even when I was recording albums or filming movies. Do not you dare suggest otherwise." The audience was now openly hostile toward Joy, with several people standing and shouting. Security guards had appeared at the edges of the studio, clearly preparing for the possibility that this situation might escalate further. Cher looked around the studio one last time, taking in the faces of the audience members who had supported her throughout this ordeal. Then she turned back to Joy with finality. "I'm leaving now, Joy. I'm walking away from this disaster of an interview, and I'm taking my dignity with me, something you seem to have lost a long time ago." Joy made one last desperate attempt to maintain control. "If you leave now, you are just proving that you cannot handle real questions from real journalists." Cher paused at the edge of the set and turned back one final time. "Joy, let me tell you what I am proving. I am proving that I have enough self-respect to remove myself from a toxic situation. I am proving that I will not allow anyone, not even someone with a television show, to abuse me for entertainment. And I am proving that real strength sometimes means walking away." With that, Cher turned and walked off the set, leaving behind a studio in chaos, an audience in shock, and a host who had just destroyed her own credibility in pursuit of a cheap thrill. The cameras kept rolling as Joy sat alone at her desk, finally realizing what she had done and what it was going to cost her.